everyone. Welcome to today's podcast. We're going to be talking about the Skift Meetings Forum, which took place last week at the Glass House in New York City. I'm Barbara Scafidio, an editor with Skift Meetings, and I'm so excited to introduce my colleagues who worked tirelessly on the forum, Miguel Neves and Andrea Doyle. They have a lot to share of the event and the day itself. And what an event it was. Before we get started, don't forget to follow or subscribe to this podcast whenever you're listening or watching. And if you're enjoying the show, please rate us 5 stars or leave us a positive review so we can spread the word about Skift Meetings Podcast. And if you have a moment, why not share with a friend or colleague?
Hey there, it's Seth Borko, the head of Skift Research, and I've got a brand new report that I want to share with you today. It's called our State of Travel 2024 report. It's perhaps the single most comprehensive report we do every year, and the best part, it's free to download right now. We have 350 plus insights in this report with pretty much a chart for basically any sector. Do you need a chart on hotels? We've got that. A chart on airlines? We've got it. A chart on consumer behavior? Guess what? We've got that too. I really appreciate if you check out our State of Travel report. You can download it now by going to skift.com/state of travel with dashes between every word. So that's skift.com/state-of-travel. Download the report, check it out, and let me know what you think. I hope you enjoy.
So welcome again, Miguel and Andrea. Why don't we start by sharing a little background about the Skift Meetings Forum? I'll start with you, Miguel.
Sure. So thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoy these sessions where we're talking about our event, Skift Meetings Forum. It happened last week in New York, the 17th of September. This was our second ever Skift Meetings Forum. It is, if you've listened to previous episodes of our podcast, we've talked a little bit about the history, but just to give you in a nutshell, it's a one-day, one-stage event for planners. It is extremely focused on the needs of planners and an understanding of what's happening in the industry. It is modeled around the Skift Global Forum, which just took place as well. It was the 11th edition of that. Also a one-stage event, but for the whole of the travel industry, so a bit of a wider scope there. But very much about what's happening in the industry, the hottest news, and having experts who can really debate and explore these topics with us on stage. That's really the focus of Skift Meetings Forum.
I remember 2 years ago, it was my first Skift Global Forum, and we were sitting in the audience watching what they did, which was just, it's an amazing conference. And Miguel and I said, wouldn't it be really interesting if we were able to do something for Skift Meetings in conjunction with the Skift Global Forum? And that was what ignited the idea.
So let's dig a little deeper. So who attends? And also, how is it different? There's so many industry events out there. How would you consider this different?
It's a good question. And I think every event will say that it's different, right? So I think we have to try to make a good case here. So the event is really focused for senior planners. We try to attract corporate and association planners, also agencies. So there's a bit of a mix there, but it's really focused on the planners. And of course, then we also sell tickets so the general industry can attend. It is not just a planner exclusive event, let's say, but we do have some VIP complimentary tickets for planners, so planners can apply and can join the event. We don't host the planners, but we hope that the content and the connection that is available and kind of on stage for them is plenty plenty to offer. And I think we were pretty successful this year. We had 250 people register, so we're pretty delighted with that. I think how it's different for me is just this really intense focus on the content. We treat each session just in the same way as we would writing a pretty in-depth piece of content. We have multiple calls with the speakers. First of all, we decide on the topics. We figure out which speakers we think would be the best suited to talk about those topics. And then we do a lot of research. And we prepare, we go deep, we look at interviews, we look at stories all about that topic and all about those speakers. And then when we're on stage, we try to deliver a really compact, succinct interview with the experts. That's the general format. We have a few presentations, but normally it's more of an interview format. And we find that this is a kind of TED Talk style. It's not presentation based, but it's very focused. So it's very condensed, and we really try to give people as much content as we can within a short period of time. So I think that the main differentiator for me is the amount of research and the amount of kind of editorial work that goes into each of the sessions that we have on stage.
And building upon what Miguel said, I've been in this industry for decades, and we all know there's many events where planners are hosted at the nicest hotels with the nicest activities, with gifting stations, their airfares paid for, and that's not the case with Skift Meetings Forum. So that makes it challenging in a way for us because the bar is raised that the education on the stage has to be the draw, and it has to be education they're not getting at other industry events. And that's why we pulled in names like Seth Godin that you don't hear from at other industry events.
Yeah, I mean, and I have to add that the guest list was fabulous compared to other events. And I can speak from experience as well. It was a senior direct meeting manager. We had companies like Amazon and all of the top insurance firms there, cross industries, tech, you name it. So that's pretty exciting. It speaks a lot to the draw of the education. So good for both of you. You hit the mark.
And so that makes it really even more attractive because then planners get to talk to other planners in the room.
Of their caliber. Absolutely. The Glass House. Wow. What an amazing venue. I had not seen this or even heard of it before last week. And it's so unusual to see natural light in Midtown Manhattan. How does that venue set the stage for the event? And how do you think they did as a venue?
So Glass House is definitely one of our favorites. I think it's, the name says it all, Glass House, right? It's on 12th Avenue. It has amazing light coming in and it has an unblocked view of the Hudson River. And I think that makes a lot of difference. While it doesn't, it's interesting. I never really thought too much about venues, but when you're doing an event for 250 people, I think the default setting is probably a, relatively large hotel room, maybe a ballroom, something like that. And so while ballrooms are great because they're versatile and you can do so many things with them, having a building where you can feel like you're not locked in a room, like you're still connected, not necessarily connected with nature. I mean, you're in New York after all, but you're connected, right? You can see where you are in the city. You can see the natural light. It just makes a really big difference. And I think we also had some great food. We had a lot of comments from the attendees on the food. So that I think helps. It's not provided by the Glass House directly, but they do have a preferred caterer and we use them and they're very, very good. And of course, we made some menu selections that were always trying to be healthy. But I think all that put together makes you feel pretty good, right? Because I know a lot of conferences I attend, at the end of the day, I am beat, right? And I'm not going to say that we weren't beat because there was a lot of pressure and we had a lot of work to do while we were on site. But it's a different feeling when you get to the end of the day. And I think that's really important. I mean, Andrea, how do you feel, Andrea? You've been to a few conferences in your time. I know, by the end of the day, it's a bit hard to kind of string sentences together sometimes, but it just feels a little bit different when you're in a venue like this.
No, the setting injects energy into you. And New Jersey never looked so good, did it, Miguel, from that beautiful outdoor terrace? But a few planners did ask who the caterer was because the food was so spectacular and it was great performances, because it's not an ordinary conference where you get acai bowls and little mini avocado toasts and green juice. So they think about the whole attendee, well, Skift did. So the food, no one had those doldrums in the afternoon because the food was really healthy. And so that was really awesome. The second you get to the venue, you feel like you're somewhere really special because the Glass House truly is special. There's so many outdoor terraces and, all floor to ceiling windows. And, let me say it's a sexy atmosphere. And the stage setup and just the entire room was amazing.
Meeting planners are so maxed out with all of these industry events, from supplier events to all the media companies. It's interesting. This was an invite event. So you were actually able to draw that senior level crowd via our networks, which I think is something to really emphasize as well.
I think you bring up an interesting point, Barbara, which is, does the industry really need another event?
Right.
And I think a lot of people are asking those questions, and I think that's perfectly valid. I ask that question of events all the time. I'd like to believe that yes, because of that sort of leading with content, that being really the big focus of this event. I think we're a little different. We are a media organization, and there are plenty of media organizations organizing events out there. But like Andre was saying, I think a lot of them focus on the hospitality more than the content, and I think a lot of it is very cookie cutter. And I can very proudly claim that we are not cookie cutter. I don't think you can say that about any of our sessions.
And all the industry events I go to, people always stop me to say that they feel Skift Meetings is the only publication in the industry that really writes true journalistic stories.
Absolutely.
We report on the news. We're not looking to make advertisers happy. It's straight news. And we took that philosophy and we bring it to the stage. So that's what I think is truly refreshing. So, like, for instance, one of my sessions was about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I had written a few stories at the beginning of the year about the shakeup at Tourism Diversity Matters. And that happened as a result of an open letter Dr. Brandy Baldwin wrote. And when she published that open letter, 10 other women came forward to say they too were victims of workplace bullying. Well, those stories took a great deal of research. And then when I was talking with Miguel about our sessions, I said, how about we reach out to Dr. Brandy and have her on stage? And she was a resounding yes. So it was just the different voices that made it really different.
Let's not just toot our own horn here. I think it's important if listeners relate to this and they recognize some of this. So get in touch if you're listening. Tell us if we're wrong. Tell us how we can improve. Just get in touch via email. It's always the best way. meetings@skift.com. We're always open to feedback. And if anything that we're saying doesn't resonate, doesn't make sense, then let us know. If it does, then also let us know, or tell the rest of the world about it. But let's keep talking about the forum.
Yeah, let's drill down into the speakers, starting with Seth Godin, who I thought was just fabulous because he spoke when he usually speaks about broader management marketing topics. This time he spoke about our industry, and he shared some examples that were pretty stunning about events that he'd been to. Do either of you want to share what you got out of his talk?
One of his points was make every meeting like the conversation in the green room. And that made me chuckle because I had such an amazing conversation with him in the green room about meetings and about the fact that it's such an important industry because it's one of the only places people continue their education. Most people get their college degree and that is it. But meetings are education.
Yeah, I think I've been following Seth for a long time. Seth Godin, I have 2 of his books. I think I've read a few more online. He's a really, really interesting thinker. He writes, he's a really interesting guy, period, right? He writes on his blog every day. This is seth.blog is the URL. Once a day he writes, hasn't missed a day in something like 10 years. So there's thousands of blog posts. He's not on social media. He's completely offline in many ways. And I think he talks about this and writes about this, about kind of staying focused and really choosing the areas where you think you can impact the world. And so when we had this opportunity to bring Seth Godin on stage at Skift Meetings Forum, I got a little nervous, I have to be honest, because he also has a lot of things to say about the meetings industry. He has one post just about how much he hates roundtables. And we had roundtables at Skift Meetings Forum. So that was interesting. I didn't know how he was going to react to that, but there was no real kind of conversation around that. But I think that the value that Seth brings is first of all, expertise in that marketing sphere where he's really, a very well-known expert in, but also a sort of external voice and external view on meetings. And I think the reminders that he had in his talk about creating tension, how that's our job, and kind of that idea of the green room and providing these amazing experiences. I think those are all really valid. And I think particularly We have this industry, we have this room with senior planners, which is great. But I think, we polled the planners at the start of the day, and a good number of them, I think something like 70% had over 10 years of experience in the industry, which is great, right? It's exactly what we're looking for. And I think those people can relate to each other a lot. But I think there are people that are also very used to certain formats, very used to running events in a certain way. And I think it's always useful to have someone like Seth come in and poke that a little bit and sort of ask questions and say, should we be doing this? Shouldn't we also be thinking about that? He also talked about the idea of events running kind of all year round, or creating connection with people all year round, not just at the event. Again, something we talk about a lot, but it's always interesting to hear someone like Seth's views on how to do that. And I think that green room experience was a good kind of concept. It was interesting because we had Ken Holsinger on stage later kind of question, well, that sounds like a great idea, but in practice, that's kind of really hard to do, right? You can't do a green room for thousands and thousands of people. But I think what Seth Godin was saying was more about the feeling, right? It was more that people will pay for access. People will pay for that special moment. And I think it's great. I think it resonated well. It definitely came through in the surveys as one of the favorite sessions. And I'd love to kind of, if we can keep the conversation going with Seth Godin, because he obviously has a lot of really interesting things to say that in and around the meetings industry.
And many planners who attended reached out to me to say how impactful Seth was and how so many of his messages are resonating with them, and how they're reading more of his books, and how it's going to change the way they do their business. So I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, he was about blowing up a lot of what we do, which isn't a bad thing. He mentioned start by firing your 3 most boring speakers and replace them with conversation. Pull your people in the audience together and give them a question to solve instead. And at first they'll be all flustered, but then you're going to have a great outcome. Things like that make you think. And
it's almost like he knew the whole agenda already, because we did that later on, right? I mean, we didn't do it in exactly that format, but we had our comparing notes sessions where we had a core question on stage, and then we asked people at tables to connect with each other and address those questions. And I think that was pretty similar to what Seth had in mind, and I think those went really well as well. So it was kind of the connection and the peer-to-peer learning rather than everything coming from the stage. Because I also, we talked a lot about the quality and sort of the care that we put into what happens on stage, but not all learning happens on stage. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And I think they were very well received as well in the surveys. So that's something that I think we should unpack as well.
And of course, it takes a team. So a huge shout out to our event producer, Jane and Brian. And when Miguel, who was passionate about doing the comparing notes sessions, told Jane about it, at first, she just kind of looked at him, because it's not something Skift Global Forum typically does. But I'm happy Miguel was passionate about it, and we did it because it really worked out well. And that was thanks to you as well, Barbara. You were such a great leader in those sessions.
Thank you. I think it went really well. So, Andrea, you interviewed Monique Ruff-Bell of TED Conferences, and she's just an inspiring woman.
Total powerhouse.
Up on that stage. Why don't you share a few points from that?
Well, whenever you talk to Monique, she just gets you to think really deep about things. And it's amazing to me that she's paved her own way. She said throughout her career, she would go to the senior management and say, I want to be in the meetings with the C-suite. I'll sit off to the side and I will stay quiet, because for me to get to where I want to go, I need to learn the language of the C-suite, which was so interesting to me. And, she's all about taking chances, knowing your worth. She said, as female leaders, apply for the job, even if you feel as if you don't have all the qualifications. Because sometimes if a man has 5 of the 10, they're going to apply, but a woman feels as if she should have 10 of the 10, but that's not necessarily the case. You could learn the other 2 on the job. And I did learn a lot from her as a speaker, because when we first got on stage, she got the audience she added an interactive element by asking everyone in the audience to scream out how they feel about the industry at this moment. And, people said things like, like burnt out, chaotic.
Easy.
And that was just a great way to infuse some energy and get the audience really, really focused. But you know what? When she gets on the stage and starts talking, you're focused on what she has to say because there's so many nuggets that are going to help you go to a better place in your career.
Are you tired of sifting through endless resumes looking for the perfect candidate to fill a leadership opening? Skift Executive Search can help. We have an insider view of the travel industry and can leverage both our expertise and connections to find your next rockstar hire. To learn more, visit skift.com/exec-search or email us at execsearch@skift.com.
Yeah, I think that session really resonated. I think it was probably the favorite out of everybody's session from the survey results. I wanted to highlight something that we could maybe cover a little bit in the preparation. We didn't have too much preparation with Seth Godin. He pretty much just, that Seth's going to do his thing on stage. And I think the preparation with Monique as well, we covered a lot of different topics, right? We went in a lot of different directions. But Andre, you tell me if I'm speaking out of line, but I think that was sort of the gist of it. And I guess I wanted to mention that when you are working with smart people that are admired, people that are recognized for their brilliance, I think part of the curating and preparing for these sessions is also figuring out what's important to them and figuring out what they want to talk about and kind of curating that in a way that makes sense for your audience, makes sense for Skift meetings in this case, but making sure we don't like stomp on that, because it's easy when you're doing this preparation to be very like, no, we want to talk about this and we want to kind of focus this. And this is the flow that I think will make sense. But I think it's a two-way street, right? You need to get feedback from speakers and there needs to be a sort of like passion about excitement about a topic. And I think that makes the best sessions. And I think that really came true in this, in the session.
Well, I'm happy you're saying that because of course we talked about what our sessions were going to look like. And I had a Google Doc with bullet points I was hoping to cover. And a few days before the forum, I shared it with Miguel. And my Google Doc on Monique Ruff-Bell was like 4 to 5 pages. And Miguel's like, there is no way you're going to get through all this in 25 minutes. So I'm thankful to him for helping me really navigate the session. And, I had to cut a lot of the questions. And then, you know what? Truth be told, the conversation went down a whole different path, but it was so interesting. I just let it go that way organically.
Yeah. And that's another thing that we always do. We prepare, we have questions, we have a flow, but a lot of times answers don't go in the direction that we were expecting. The flow doesn't necessarily make that much sense anymore. Or you cover part of another question with the previous question, right? So I think it's something that we also try to do is keep the conversation a conversation.
And so in my mind, my session was going to be really more about cultivating leaders in the industry because that's something Monique is really passionate about. And especially with the fact that not everyone came back to the industry after the pandemic, her passion is growing leaders. And we touched upon it, but we didn't dive as deep into that as I thought we were going to, but that's okay because she brought up so many other points that I thought were important for the audience to hear.
Yeah, and I knew you were going to cover that. And I think it makes more sense to do it the way it ended up happening because I think what resonated with the audience was Monique's journey, was how she got to where she is. And, the steps and how intentional she was in all the steps that she took. And I think that's a really good way to inspire people. We can talk about initiatives. We had a whole session about the next generation. We talked about initiatives that people are doing, but actually understanding how someone did it and kind of emulating that, I think is super powerful. And it's really speaking from experience, which is a very powerful place to speak from. So I'm very happy with how that turned out.
So that's what I think makes, the forum so spectacular is we let the conversation go the way it's going to go. It's not question, answer. It's truly a conversation.
I mean, Barbara, you tell us, how did you feel from the audience? You were covering the forum, you were writing stories about the different sessions. Did that come through? How do you think people responded to that?
Yeah, people were looking to be inspired at this event. This was not an event about how to. This was an event about strategy, kind of broader blue sky thinking, and inspiration. And uh, I think we hit all of those. And even the industry powerhouses we brought in, that we were talking about pretty significant topics like next gen, like politics. Let's just I'm going to run down the names of all of the industry greats we had in the room, and I don't know, maybe you want to each just share one or two tidbits from that you got out of their sessions. We had Karina Bauer there from IMEX, Mike Dominguez, always a favorite, Senthil Gopinath, Sheriff Karamat, Reggie Agarwal, Ken Hulsinger. You had Rob Adams, Ben Irwin from Encore, and Nicola Kastner, who I thought was terrific. So, you know what? That's a lot of names, but maybe you could share from the sessions you did one or 2 points from that group.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Nicola Kastner, I loved when she said, you need to focus on the events business, not the business of events. And just focusing on logistics isn't going to get you into a leadership role. And Rob Adams, and then we talked about the tangible and the intangible components of a meeting or event. And Rob Adams is all about infusing joy and feeling into an event because, you know, it's the way you make people feel as a result of an event that's going to make them remember.
Yeah, I mean, industry greats, I think, obviously very important for us to have names on the stage that are recognized and respected. But I think I'd also want to add that we really picked them because of knowledge they had in different areas. So we had Ken Holsinger from Freeman, Karina Bauer, and Sheriff Karamat doing a session about the next generation, which I recognize they're not the next generation themselves. So I think it's important for us to...
Nor are we.
Nor are we, right?
Have you seen Ken's sneakers? Those sneakers bring him to the next generation in my book.
They make him 10 years younger, right? Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because I think there's also a challenge where if you put someone very young on stage, they could be talking a lot of nonsense. I don't know really, but they can talk from their experience. I think it depends what you're asking. And in this case, I was asking more about how PCMA as an association, but also putting on quite large events and IMEX as well, how they're changing their events, right? How they're adapting. And I teased Karina with this question around RecFest, which if you haven't heard about it, it's an HR event that happens in the UK where it used to be a conference in a hotel and they actually took it and made it into a festival. So it happens over 3 days in a field, in a muddy field, just like many music festivals in the UK. But it's a conference. It's a conference about HR. And I don't really know that much about the HR industry. I don't know if they're more social, more into drinking than other industries, but it's a conference that's done something a little bit different, right? And I sort of teased Karina into, is IMEX going to be in a field one day? And her answer is obviously no, but I think it was interesting to just see how both IMEX and PCMA and Freeman as well, Ken shared some great data from kind of generational research, but also some of the things that Freeman does at their events, and learning how these organizations are adapting, are changing their events, are doing things differently because they want to make sure that the younger generations are like the events and enjoy the events and kind of attracted to the events. I think that's fascinating, and there's some good news there. It seems that younger generations do enjoy events, but I mean, my kind of biggest takeaway is that the younger generations are sort of pushing us to make our events more fun, more hands-on, more engaging. And I don't know if that's a generational thing ultimately. I think everybody enjoys that. If we can make our events more tactile, more exploring all the senses, I think everybody is going to enjoy that. My feeling is that we might be just more, the older generations are just so tuned and so sort of trained to go to these events, and that's what to expect. So I think the younger generations have that fresh perspective so they can push for different things. So I think that's great. And I also learned a little bit from how PCMA is doing. And, Sheriff told us that I think 30% of PCMA membership is Gen Y. And I think that's, or Gen Y or Gen Z, right? And I think that's impressive, right? That's working pretty hard. But how is PCMA's membership going to change to whatever they need, right? Because they want to be able to keep those members. So that was a really interesting session. I also got to speak to both Reggie Agarwal, CEO of Cvent, and Ben Irwin, CEO of Encore. And those were sessions, they were just one-on-one interviews. They were very much around the business and kind of developing the industry for those two very large companies. And they were kind of interesting. They're both very, very astute speakers. They know when to be quiet and when to speak. And so as much as we poked and we tried to get some kind of, backroom conversations going, it was on stage. And I think I was very happy they were there. They shared a lot of really interesting data. They shared a lot of how they look at the business. But I want to do more. I want to ask them tougher questions. I want to ask them more about how they're looking at business. And I think it's good that we have that relationship, and that they spoke to our audience, and our audience kind of recognizes them. But I think the audience wants more. And I think there were both questions that had a lot of questions come up through the app, through the Q&A. And I'd love to do a follow-up in some way to kind of ask the tougher questions and get answers to the questions that the audience had. So definitely more to come there.
Yeah, I mean, just for the audience, we have written about all of these sessions, and the articles are on the Skift Meetings website right now, so you can get a lot of great info about what happened at the forum right on our website. We spoke about the comparing notes session. I can't say enough about bringing people together to brainstorm for short periods of time and then reporting out. It's a tried and true format, but people were excited about it. We brought up people who had been assigned to listen in on 3 or 4 tables. We brought them up to the stage, and they reported out for a couple of minutes on trends that were that they were hearing at the various tables. Do you see more of that interactive type of programming for next year's forum? I want to talk a little bit about next year as well.
Yeah, look, I think that's a core part of the forum. We had 2 25-minute, 30-minute sessions comparing notes. We had extended networking breaks, and we had lunch. And in the survey forums, were still people asking for more networking, more opportunities to connect. And so I think we definitely want to do more of that. We are doing our IMEX Innovation Lab at IMEX America on October 7th, which is really just focused on this connecting. So that's our lab where we also test this out a little bit more and figure out ways to do it. I think the challenge for us, and speaking very candidly, is to make it make sense from a business perspective. I think we want to make sense. I'd love to have an event where most of the event is conversations. The challenge with that is that, that's almost an event with no content from the stage. And I think when people sign up for an event, they want to know what speakers are there. They want to know kind of what content is available. And there has to be a certain level of content. Unless you're signing up for a masterclass where there's one speaker and they're just going to be the facilitator for the whole day, then I think you know what to expect. But this is an industry conference at the end of the day, so we want to have a number of speakers. And so it's about finding that right balance. And we also need to have sponsors to support the event. And it's hard to sponsor conversations. It's hard to find a good way to include sponsors into that without breaking that magic, right? You want to have peers talking to peers. You want to have those conversations going. And so we're working through different ways of doing that. And I want to say we're going to do more of that. I don't know what that looks like in detail. I think every time we do it, we learn a little bit more about how to get the report outs right, how to ask questions from the audience, how to start those conversations going. Because I think once you get started, everybody wants to talk. But getting started is sometimes very awkward and sort of, I can see people kind of trying to sneak out of the room before the session starts because they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this interactive thing. I just want to sit in the back of the room and, be on my emails while I can. And, when you ask someone like, don't be on your emails, don't be working, like this is really valuable time, you're asking a lot, right? And so I think you have to sort of build that trust with the audience as well so that they trust you enough to kind of commit and then hopefully get a lot out of it. So The answer from me is definitely yes. It's something I'm always going to push for at all our events. I think Global Forum, the Skift Global Forum, should also do something like that. I think people do want to connect over content, over ideas, but we want to just find ways that make sense commercially, that make sense in the marketing as well, because we know that there's a certain kind of number of speakers, a certain kind of depth of agenda that people are looking for when they sign up. And so, yeah, for me, yes, absolutely. But it's about finding the right balance. And I think we're always going to be experimenting with this to do it better and better.
And I like the way the comparing notes sessions were set up, that they were conversations about the previous speaker. So we had someone on stage in conversation with an editor about a really hard-hitting topic, and then we built upon that. And also, I'd like to touch upon the fact that in addition to the networking, we had the hands-on give back activity. Clean the World was set up there, and they go into hotel rooms and take toiletries and soaps and sterilize them and put them in new containers and into little packs and then send them to homeless shelters or developing countries. So they were on hand, and planners enjoyed filling the kits and writing inspirational messages that went into the kits. So that was a great addition to the forum as well.
Absolutely. These are all chances to connect with other people who are at the table at that moment, and then it's an incredible cause. We also did an excursion to the shed of the performing arts venue in Hudson Yards, and got a nice sized group to head down there and take a look at this really innovative building. So again, it's that conversation on the bus. It's the people you meet as you're walking around, that just fills it out. Yeah.
I was surprised by the number of New York City based planners who went on that excursion and said, I've always heard about the shed, but I've never had the chance to tour the space. And they were really happy to have this chance.
I mean, I was very impressed with the shed, actually. I think it's something that we want to do more of, this idea of touring, this idea of getting to know venues, this idea of, really kind of being hands-on. But again, it's something that has to make sense financially. It has to kind of work with everything else that's happening at the event. So watch the space. We definitely want to do more of that and introduce people in person to different venues. And I think venues like the shed, right? Because as you said, Andre, I think it was a venue that I think a lot of people knew about from a performing arts perspective. It's, the whole building is very impressive. It's very unusual, but it's very impressive. The whole building actually moves or can move for special occasion. It has these gigantic wheels on the outside. So it's definitely something people talk about. And hopefully some people will have left that tour with a new idea or a new kind of concept for their events, that getting inspired from the shed, let's say.
One of the planners said she was reaching out to them this week about booking a reception there. So
well, there you go. Maybe the shed will be our top sponsor next year for getting.
And the same with the Glass House too. So many planners said, I never knew this venue existed, and I'm going to reach out. I'd like to book my events here.
Nice job. So before we wrap, are there any other tidbits you can offer as far as what you've learned from the feedback or what you're thinking about for next year?
Well, what excites me the most is taking the stories we write every day and bringing them to the stage. And, if anyone listening ever has story ideas or tips, please reach out, because we're not working in silos. It has to be a collaboration. So always open to hear from everyone out there.
Absolutely. And, we are debriefing. We are looking through all the surveys and figuring out what to do bigger and better next year. Still, a lot of work to be done there. But I think one of the things that I definitely want to look at is the selection of speakers and topics. I think the session with Monique Ruffbell that we've already mentioned resonated so much that I think it's something that we want to go a little bit deeper into. And I'd like to find more inspiring planners, people that are actually working in the field that can share their story, and maybe, different perspectives, different generations, different parts of the world, maybe just different ways of getting ahead. Because I think ultimately our audience really wants to understand how they can personally develop, how they can personally grow, personally and professionally, but individually, let's say. And I think that's something we're going to double down on and kind of focus more on for next year. So hopefully that's something that's going to resonate with the audience, and then we'll have more and more people sign up to join.
And if our listeners, if there's anyone they want to hear from, if there's anyone that inspires them, let us know who that person is.
Yep. Again, meetings@skift.com is the email address. We are listening. Please write to us. Please let us know what you think.
We are listening. And at this point, I think we're going to wrap up today's podcast. But some great insights, Miguel and Andrea. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Barbara.
Barb.
Thank you.
Hey there, if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, please make sure to subscribe, rate us 5 stars, or leave us a positive review. That really helps us get out the word about the Skift Meetings podcast and make sure that we can continue to bring you this podcast every week, absolutely free of charge. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Skift channel and hit the notification bell to find out whenever a new video drops.
With more than 50 articles per week, exclusive feature stories twice a month, live events, podcasts, reports, and more, Skift is the source for global travel industry news. See what we've been up to at skift.com and stay ahead with the latest insights and trends shaping the future of travel.